In this video, I'll give you a brief overview of what you can rapidly accomplish for your front-end design using the Bootstrap framework. Bootstrap is a wildly popular front-end framework that was developed at Twitter and formerly known as Twitter Bootstrap, but today just goes by the name Bootstrap. At the heart of Bootstrap is a 12-column grid system that we use to organize layouts across multiple types of client devices. We use different CSS class names for each column in a row to specify how many of the 12 available columns we wish to span for each section. In general, we'll make the total columns add up to 12, but for example in the third row pictured here, if we didn't have any content for the 4 columns at the end, we could just remove them without affecting the layout of the first 8 columns. Generally what we'll do is specify that a layout is meant for a certain size device, for example a desktop computer, and then the columns will automatically collapse into a vertical layout for smaller devices, unless we specifically override that behavior with additional CSS classes. The first thing I want to do is go into the index view and remove this Jumbotron section, Jumbotron being itself a Bootstrap class, and then basically start over from scratch here and create a UI that's a little bit more like what we would expect from an ATM, with just several options that can be accessed with some large buttons. If we're going to specify columns for the grid layout, we'll want to start with a div with the row class, so we'll leave that here. Next, I'm going to add 2 columns that each take up half of the available width by specifying that they'll span 6 of the 12 columns. And I can do that with the call-md-6 class. The MD is for medium-sized devices and larger. Let's take a quick look at these class definitions on getbootstrap.com. If I click CSS in the main nav, and then Grid System on the right, followed by Grid Options, I get a handy table that explains these classes. So I just use the call-md-6 class. That means it should span half of the available 12 columns on devices with a viewport width greater than or equal to 992 pixels. Below that, the grid will have a collapsed or vertical layout as it states here. So let's continue with our example. Inside this first column div, I'm going to start adding some buttons. I'm going to create these as anchor tags and then apply some button styles from Bootstrap. And you can read more about these styles under buttons on the same page we just looked at. And we'll fill in the href attribute later as we implement functionality for these options. So first we'll add the base button class, btn, then btn-primary will add some color to it, btn-large to make it a bit bigger, and btn-block to make it a block level element that spans the entire width. And this first button is going to be for the withdrawal option. So let's see what we have so far. Okay, we have a single lonely button up here, and I don't like that it's pushed right up against the nav bar, so let's take care of that. One thing that Bootstrap won't help you with too much is creating vertical space between elements. So I'm going to go into site.css and add my own custom class to add a top margin to any element. I don't want to do this in bootstrap.css because I may upgrade that at some point with NuGet and replace it completely, and then I would lose any changes I made in that file. So we'll apply the margin top 20 class to each column so that when they do collapse, for the mobile view, there'll be some spacing between the 2 columns. And then one more thing I want to do to make this a little more appealing is add what's known as a glyph. On the Bootstrap site, if I choose components from the top, the first thing I see is an array of glyph icons, and these are built into Bootstrap, and underneath each one is the name of a CSS class that I can use to apply it somewhere and make it appear on my page. But these classes aren't meant for applying to just any element. What we want to do is create an empty span and give it the glyph icon base class, and then the class for whatever glyph we want. And for withdrawal, I'm going to choose glyph icon -circle arrow down. And let's refresh and take a look. Okay, that's looking a little bit better now. But let's add some more options. I'm going to copy this 2 times, and let's indent that a little bit. And then I'm going to add 2 more options quick cache, $100, and balance inquiry. And these will have the glyphs flash and question sign. Next, I'm going to copy this entire column, or the inner HTML of it, and then add 3 more options on the right. These will be print statement, transfer funds, and deposit. And then some glyph icons that might be appropriate there are print, transfer, and circle arrow up. So let's save and take a look now. And the last thing I might want to do is add a header image here. We'll do that by adding a row in the layout file. So this will be right above the body, and it will have a column with a class of call md-12. If you're using the exercise files, there's a header image in Chapter 2 inside the Images folder. And since I don't have an Images folder yet, I'm just going to drag this entire Images folder into Content. And once that's there, I can drag logo.ping inside this div. I'm also going to add the img-responsive class to make it scale for different devices, and the center block class to make it a block level element with automatic margins to center it. And now when I refresh, you can see that when I resize, not only does the image scale down nicely, but the buttons stack on top of each other. And that's just so that they can fit the display better. That should give you a good starter set of tools for working with Bootstrap. Take some time to experiment, and then join me for the next chapter on models and data. If you're following along with the exercise files, you can find all of the work we did in this chapter in the final folder inside the Chapter 2 folder.